Afghanistan. It's on the news all the time these days. Well, 20 years. I mean, yeah, I guess it would be newsworthy. Well, with Joe Biden, with his withdrawal plans from Afghanistan, here's the thing. There's been some kind of a commitment made to withdraw, even from the last administration. And I'm thinking, no matter who's president, the plans to withdraw from Afghanistan, it's not going to be 100% neat, orderly, or what have you. But do I believe the mainstream media? Do I believe the military-industrial complex on how ineffective and dysfunctional and dangerous this pullout is? Well, the world is complicated, and as I said, I don't think that this pullout would have been 100% neat and orderly, no matter who's president. And some people wanting to be partisan and to blame Biden, and he's getting blamed from all ends. I mean, he's getting blamed from the Democrats. Some Democrats don't like it. There are neoconservative influences in the Democrats too. Republican partisans are really, really vicious about it, and unfortunately, it looks like we may be seeing the return of the neocons. And I hope I'm wrong saying that, but my gosh, they're coming out of the woodwork. I heard Mark Levin yapping away about it. I heard Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity and people like Ben Shapiro and all these people yapping their way about how bad it is that we're pulling out of Afghanistan because they all lust for the war. George W. Bush is sorrowful. Oh, play the world's smallest violin. Uh, so that's what's going on. And so Biden's been getting a lot of shit for the one good thing he's going to do while he's president. I hope that there's more good things he'll be doing, but well, this is one where I am going to be on his side. Pulling out of Afghanistan is the right thing to do. And there's a lot to say about it. But speaking of neocons, a mass murderer by the name of John Bolton also opposes the pullout of Afghanistan. Why am I not shocked to hear that? Well, John Bolton was interviewed recently, and he gives his take. And as soon as he gives his take on Afghanistan, here I'm also going to give you my take. So hold tight, and we'll talk about this very shortly. Here we go.
John Bolton, who served as the US's ambassador to the UN under President George W. Bush and as the National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump. John Bolton, good to have you back on the program. When you hear the Taliban today, as I'm sure you did in that rather strange press conference, say that they will respect the rights of women, they will respect the education of women, they will respect an independent media, etc., etc., do you believe them?
Well, they did say they would respect all that under Sharia law, as interpreted by the Taliban. So by the very statement of it, they're not making a very convincing case. I think right now Taliban have their smiley faces on because they've had good Western public relations advice. And, you know, they won't get back to slitting throats until everybody's out of Hamid Karzai International Airport. I don't trust them any more today than we did 20 years ago. And I understand what they're saying. I understand what some of their apologists in the West are saying. The only proof we'll have is in the experience after they take control. But if you look for where the best evidence is, it's in the minds of the Afghan people. And as far as I can see from a distance, they're terrified.
And is it possible that the Taliban might have changed in these 20 years? I mean, become a different kind of Taliban, as some of them would have us believe?
Look, anything is possible, but consider the psychology. They were tossed out of power 20 years ago. They've spent 20 years in exile and camps in Pakistan and in even more remote places of Afghanistan. They've now fought their way back to power. Are they really going to come into Kabul and say, you know, all that ideology we pursued these last 30 or 40 years, we're going to put all that aside. Kumbaya, let's go attend international conferences in Paris on climate change. Not going to happen.
And do you think they've learned their lesson when it comes to harboring international terrorist organizations, which is the reason why they got toppled in the first place?
I don't think there's any reason to believe that. These people are pursuing a very strict ideology. And that's really the concern that I have for why it was a mistake to leave Afghanistan entirely as we have now done. The strategic reason to stay in Afghanistan was as an insurance policy against Taliban coming back to power and ISIS and Al Qaeda and others getting sanctuary there from which to plan attacks on America, Europe, and the rest of the world. I think the risk is very high. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think it will begin to happen soon. We've had estimates from observers who say there may be as many as 10,000 foreign fighters already in Afghanistan. And again, we can't say how accurate that is, but it's very troubling.
I believe one of the reasons why you resigned from the Trump cabinet is because you didn't agree with the then president's policy of negotiating with the Taliban over the heads of the government in Kabul. Who's more to blame here? Is it President Trump for doing that, or is it President Biden for the unseemly haste, if you like, of America's departure?
Well, there's certainly plenty of blame to go around. I think there are two things happening simultaneously. One is the decision to withdraw. And on that score, Trump and Biden essentially see things exactly the same way. They are on withdrawal from Afghanistan, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They are equally to blame. The second question is how the actual withdrawal is being executed. And that, I have to say, is on Biden. This has been a debacle. It's an embarrassment, a humiliation. I think it's seen Biden shred his own credibility, his own effort to present himself as the professional who can handle national security affairs. And I'm terribly worried whatever happens in Afghanistan, that the reverberations around the world are going to be very, very detrimental to America and the West more broadly.
You're an old Washington hand. You've served in government. Why couldn't you persuade Donald Trump to adopt a different course when it came to the Taliban?
Because he was convinced that it was in his political interest to end this endless war and say he got all Americans out. And as I explain in my book at some length, the way to understand how Donald Trump thinks is to ask what he thinks is in his political benefit.
Isn't that the problem here with America's foreign involvement? Too much of it is defined by America's domestic election cycles.
Well, that's a problem with democracy that you've identified. I don't know that there's a cure for that. I think that what we've lacked in the past several decades, though, is leaders who have understood the strategic threats we face and explained them properly to the American people.
One final line: Saigon 1975, Tehran 1979, Kabul 2021. Just as bad as the others?
Well, I think this actually may be more like Tehran than Saigon. I really I worry for the people of Afghanistan, the terror that they're about to undergo, just as I worry about the terror threat we may face if Taliban let Al Qaeda and ISIS back in.
Well, wasn't that about 5 minutes worth of sloppy shit that we just heard here about this John Bolton character? Doesn't that mustache, doesn't it remind you of a mushroom cloud? It's kind of fitting for him, I guess, because give that man any more power than he already had over the years, we would see mushroom clouds popping up every once in a while. But anyway, yeah, this guy, he was the national security advisor under Donald Trump. He was the U.S. ambassador to the UN under George W. Bush, and previously, in the early part of his administration, served in the State Department, and he served in the Bush administration and in the Reagan administration as well. So this guy's been around for quite a while. Well, under George W. Bush, he was very much involved with this false claims of collaboration between Al Qaeda and Iraq, and that Iraq has supposedly weapons of mass destruction, that sort of thing. So, this I frankly don't believe anything that comes out of the mouth of John Bolton. I mean, John Bolton could say, "Hey, in the 1960s, there was a group called the Beatles from Liverpool, England, and they became one of the most popular musical groups of the 1960s, and they defined the culture of the 1960s." The fact that it would come out of John Bolton's mouth, I would have to go and do hours, if not days, of research to make sure that information is correct, because that's how much I doubt John Bolton. And he talks about the people of Afghanistan terrified, with this new situation. It was the policies of people like John Bolton that had people terrified around the world. And, he doubts that the Taliban would be good faith actors. Okay, I can kind of agree with that. They're not pro democracy. They're not. They're not ready for democracy. And the thing about it is, even in the 1980s, a lot of these Taliban leaders were in the White House hanging out with Ronald Reagan, as Ronald Reagan declared them, comparing them to the founding fathers of our country. Well, speaking of Reagan, Reagan is a lot of the reason why we have this mess in Afghanistan today. I'm not saying that the Soviets were absolutely and undisputably the good guys, but if I'm ever been a tanky in one area in my ideology, I suppose that I will side with the tankies in regard to Afghanistan in the 1980s. I'm not going to say the Soviets were the good guys, but I would say they were the least bad option. And the thing about it is, this whole experiment, nation building, to try to turn Afghanistan or Iraq or any of these other countries into vibrant democracies, secular Western style democracies, I like nothing better to see that happen. There's nobody that supports Western style democracy more than I do. It's actually the best system around. And I make no bones about it. But you're not going to be able to turn Afghanistan into modern day Austria. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And I wish it could be different, but it's just that's not the case. Now, when the Soviets were in Afghanistan, and there was a government that were in power, loyal to the Soviet Union prior to the Soviets going in there as a police action, Afghanistan, I mean, women were not dressing like ghosts. They were not dressed up in burqas and hijabs and some of these other garbs. They were pretty much like women in the West. They could go to college. They had it was the country was secular. Healthcare was available to everybody. Education. All the trappings of much of the West was found in Afghanistan, in spite of the communist government. But when with the Taliban basically pushing the Soviets away in 1989, and in 1996, the puppet government hanging on as much as they could, that short-lived communist government toppled, and the Taliban came over and took over the country, and then we're in the situation that we saw as a result. And the thing about it is, concern about terrorism. Well, here's the thing: if they're concerned about a return, Afghanistan as a terrorist state, or what have you, which it wasn't really a terrorist state, they house Al Qaeda. If there's concerns about Al Qaeda or some of these other groups going into Afghanistan where they're seeking political asylum and shelter and all that, while I do support the withdrawal of U.S. troops and out of Afghanistan, I doubt that that they were going to allow terrorist organizations to operate within Afghanistan, because I think they would know what the ramifications would be if that were to happen. Um, and I just think that I just think that they're nomadic and they want to be to themselves. They're not. I hear talk about, well, we're leaving some of our weapons and over. Well, here's the thing. They're a landlocked country. They're not going to have a navy. Any planes out there? Uh, yeah, I don't think they're going to modernize the military, what have you. I don't consider them. I don't consider them a serious threat to the West. They're going to be a problem, unfortunately, to the Afghanistanian people. And I do feel for the people of Afghanistan. It's not the government I want, but we can't afford to remain in Afghanistan. We can't afford it, and really, we're no moral authority to be there, and that's the truth. And the thing about it is that John Bolton decides not only, yeah, he's blaming Biden on partisan reasons, on partisan grounds, but he also blames Trump because, in fairness, I do believe that Donald Trump wanted to get out of Afghanistan because, yeah, I mean, but I do think that a lot of the neoconservatives in his administration, a lot of the establishment, and John Bolton, it was one of them, had his hands tied in one of the few good things he wanted to do in terms of foreign policy, and that was to withdraw from Afghanistan. Well, and I'm not partisan about it. No matter who is the president withdrawing from Afghanistan, I am glad when they do it. And so, right now, as I said, Joe Biden um, is doing what is right, and that is to withdraw from Afghanistan. Now, all this concerns about terror now in Afghanistan, um, John Bolton was the biggest cheerleader, and he was the architect of all this terrorism sponsored by the United States against both good and bad people alike in the Middle East, halfway across the globe. So, the thing about it is, I mean, the situation is not perfect, but the least bad thing or the least bad thing is being done, and that is to withdraw from Afghanistan. It's not just the least bad thing; it's actually quite awesome for the United States. The trillions are going to be saved, and the American lives are going to be saved as a result. That's and as I said, my heart bleeds for the people of Afghanistan, but I am happy that Americans are not going to have to worry about getting their loved ones, their children, their spouses, their family members, their friends in harm's way in one more country. That will be one country less that the United States be involved with. And I say this, and this is American first in a good way to pull out of Afghanistan. This is America first, and not in the reactionary sense of the term that was mentioned by Trump during his 4 years, or mentioned by the American First Committee in the late 1930s, prior to World War II. This is not the reactionary version of America first. This is America first in its positive sense. And so, the thing about it is another thing. Yeah, if Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia wants to go and write articles of impeachment against both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, um, I know that pulling out of Afghanistan is even more of a correct thing to do, because there's nobody more wrong on foreign policy than Lindsey Graham, and Marjorie Taylor is just absolutely batshit crazy. So, the fact that they got the reactionary positions they have makes me want to embrace Joe Biden and make me want to embrace Kamala Harris more. And I don't even like Joe Biden, and I don't even like Kamala Harris. So that's how bad that some of these neocons are, and that's how bad people like Lindsey Graham. Well, Lindsey Graham is a neocon. Marjorie Taylor Greene's technically not a neocon, but she is a partisan hack, and she's just a vicious, vindictive, angry, redneck Karen down in Georgia that wants to go and I don't know. I mean, in her case, I wouldn't be surprised if she wants to go and relive the Turner Diaries in real life. That's just my opinion. That is just my opinion. But the thing about it is, I think it's a good thing we're pulling out of Afghanistan. And John Bolton is one more reason why it's the right thing to do. Because when it comes to John Bolton, there, I mean, he's wrong. I mean, he's wrong on virtually everything. And as I said, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, I know that they're not happy about what's going on, which puts a smile on my face. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you disagree, well, we'll have a conversation anyway. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As the First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it, because we're the muckrakers of our time. Feel free also to share. To hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, so you're kept up to date by hard-hitting social democratic commentary by yours truly. I am American social democracy. Peace, class struggle, and let's get the hell out of Afghanistan right now.